Welcome back. In this video, we are going to talk about the moon. Our goal in this video and the coming videos are to learn about the moon, and we're going to cover how the moon moves across the sky. We're going to talk about how and why the moon changes its shape, and we're also going to show how you can predict what the moon is going to look like and where it'll be at different points in the month. Before we start that, we're going to do a quick review about what we learned with the sun. The key thing to remember about the sun is that it rises in the east, moves across the sky, and it sets in the west. Second thing to remember is that it takes about 24 hours for the sun to complete one full cycle. So if we start at noon, it'll take the sun 24 hours to go back to the noon position. We'll also remember that we can only see objects when they are above the horizon line. Good? All right, now let's get on to the moon. The moon follows a similar path to the sun. Like the sun, the moon rises in the east, reaches its highest point when it gets to the noon position, and then starts to drop and sets in the west. The most important thing to remember is that the moon is slower than the sun. Rather than 24 hours, the moon being slower, it takes about 25 hours to go from the noon position all the way around and back to the noon position. So if we start both the sun and the moon in the noon position, after 24 hours, the sun is back at the noon position, but the moon is behind by about 1 hour. The next day, or 24 hours later, the sun again is at the noon position, while the moon has now fallen back to the 10 a.m. position. Every day, the moon will fall back about another hour. Eventually, the moon will catch up with the sun and we'll all be back at the starting position. Now, something very interesting happens as the moon's distance to the sun changes over the course of a month. When both the moon and the sun are in alignment, for example, they're both in the noon position, the side of the moon with all the sunlight is pointing away from the earth, so we really don't see the moon. It's dark. We call this new moon. Soon after, there's a little gap between the sun and the moon. We call this crescent moon. When there is 6 hours distance, we see a half moon, but we will call it a quarter moon. The reason we call it a quarter moon is because the month is 1 quarter complete. A few days later, we have the opposite of a crescent. The moon is mostly full, but not completely. We call this gibbous. Gibbous is a Latin term for hunchback, so we are describing a somewhat misshapen moon. Now, when the moon is a full 12 hours away, so it is directly opposite the sun, we have a nice straight line between the sun, the observer, and the moon. That is when we have a nice, beautiful, full moon. After the full moon, the moon will start to get smaller and will retrace its phases. So after a full moon, we'll have another gibbous. Then we'll have another half moon, though this time we'll call it third quarter. After that, we have another crescent. Finally, we have no moon, which is new moon, and the cycle starts again. The key things to remember are the moon follows a similar path to the sun across the sky. We also need to remember that the moon is slower than the sun, and it'll fall back about 1 hour each day. The third thing to remember is the shape of the moon in the sky depends on how much distance there is between it and the sun. The farther away the moon is from the sun, the brighter it will be, which means that the moon is brightest when it is opposite the sun. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll show you how you can predict what the moon will look like and where it will be in the sky. Thanks for watching.